Welcome to the premiere episode of Car Coffee Chats with Caitlin, where today we are going to be discussing being a woman in modern media and forms of feminism and examples of being a woman within the modern society of the United States. These examples are going to include Like a Boy from LSU Tiger Girls, Barbie the Movie, Lemonade by Beyonce, and commentary of Taylor Swift. We are going to start with LSU's Like a Boy. By the numbers. Via NCAA studies, the 1972 passing of Title IX required schools to increase opportunities and funding for programs and activities for women. In 1972, women received just 2% of college athletics' yearly budget. And in 2022, women receive 40% or less of college athletics funding, with the largest funding gap existing in Division I sports, where athletic departments fund men's sports twice the rate of women. So my main question with this is Title IX really working, especially with COVID having come and gone? In an interview, the head coach, Coach Hale, that she was told by the funding committees that NCAA recognized sports, quote unquote, came first, and that they were not permitted to go to UDA nationals because of costs in 2021. And via NOLA.com, the football department spent $192.77 million alone. And via Sportico, LSU is the sixth highest ranked in spending on football in the country. And when it comes to Like a Boy with the LSU Tiger Girls, the choreographer of Like a Boy was Tribe 99 Carson Rowe. She used the story of the 2021 UDA Nationals and not being permitted as the inspiration for Like a Boy, that helped them actually win the D1A Nationals for hip hop. And I think this actually really perfectly highlights, if you watch the dance, I will actually link it below because I think it is a beautiful dance and amazing choreography by Carson Rowe. I think it truly highlights what it means to be a woman in athletics as well, and it is just beautifully commentated and highlighted throughout that piece. And another thing to kind of note about it that I've realized is that Livy Dunn, an LSU gymnast, so the same exact school, is the highest grossing NIL, name, image, and likeness earner, but alas, the money from department funding talks. Especially amid COVID, there was an outbreak in Title IX lawsuits due to cuts of causing major outliers of female-to-female athletic percentages and athletes that were recruited. And it really showcased how female athletics are seen in the collegiate world, especially, unfortunately, because it actually showed in these lawsuits that a lot of the colleges do manipulate rosters to create an appearance of equity. Fresno State's being one of them, where they offered both indoor and outdoor track and field for women, but only outdoor for men. And they double counted the women's sports teams to give an extra 42 roster spots for females under Title IX, even though the team included the same exact athletes. Unfortunately, with how Title IX is written, it does include this, or allow, I should say, this double counting, and it becomes an extreme to where colleges hope privacy laws protect them in providing the exact roster numbers, where I feel as though there is a 1-for-1 ratio with a lot of male athletics. Meanwhile, with female athletics, a lot of them are double counted, just like in Fresno State with the indoor and outdoor track. Having worked in college athletics marketing, I realized this as well when I was putting in numbers and doing graphics, that a lot of the female counterpart teams were double counted, especially with track as one example, and swim and dive, and there was just a larger number of male athletics overall. And of course, this goes on no one except for the people creating those roster spots. But alas, this is something that creates a major inequality in sports in the first place, which I think just showcases one major part of what it is like being a woman in the modern world. Next is the pop culture icon of the Barbie movie that came out in July, if I remember correctly, of 2023. So here we go by the numbers Barbie. As of January 10th, 2024, Greta Gerwig's very pink fantasy comedy Barbie has collected more than 636 million US dollars at the North American box office, garnering a total of 1.45 billion US dollars worldwide, and instantly became a biggest debut ever for a film directed by a woman. Along with this achievement for Greta Gerwig, it is actually the highest grossing film of Warner Brothers' 100-year history. Of course, this is not adjusted for inflation, but it is worth noting, and is the largest worldwide film release of 2023. This goes into what I think Barbie was truly about, which was the women experience. Amid humor, the overarching subject matter was what it is like to be a woman in the modern age of media and societal pressures. And a lot of this is shown purely through a lot of iconic quotes. One being, everyone hates women, men hate women, and women hate women. It's the one thing we can agree on. Which I feel like is perfectly highlighted within the movie with the Bratz versus Barbie enigma, which is shown with the actually daughter of the leading lady, America Ferrera, being named Sasha, and showcasing her friends when Barbie and Sasha first meet. Along with this, I believe that it is actually playing on a woman's ability to be an empath and sympathy versus empathy, and how men will never understand this movie, unfortunately. And within this, we have to go within the actual definitions of empathy versus sympathy. Empathy is based on the experience one has, and therefore the Barbie movie places a lot on these ideals into empathy. So your personal experiences. So for example, Barbie shows a lot of the experiences of what it is to be a woman, therefore plays on the empathy of a woman. Meanwhile, sympathy is giving someone grace for their experiences, but never being actually able to relate to what someone is saying. So this is unfortunately where every man will exist while watching the Barbie movie, unless you are talking specifically about Ken's experiences in the Barbie movie. And just overarchingly is why I think a lot of men will not relate or enjoy this movie as much as women, or people who identify as women, I should say. It goes into almost this overarching look of how women can relate to one another on a lot of experiences. I think a lot of this does have to do with the empathy versus sympathy within this movie. And within the most layman's of terms that my dad, I have to accredit for this example, is getting pulled over. It is something that a lot of people have experienced, but I am lucky enough, knock on wood, that I have never experienced this. But the rest of my family has. So while the rest of my family can empathize with one another on the experience of being pulled over and the anxiety and stress that may be induced from being pulled over, I can only sympathize. Next is, in my opinion, how Barbie actually brings up patriarchy in quite literally the most dumbed down of ways. And so within this, I am going to also bring in numbers in terms of patriarchy. So first, the definition of patriarchy is a social system in which men have a privileged position in a society. The term patriarchy is used by various sociological theories to describe a system of social relationships, values, norms, and behavior patterns that are predominantly shaped by men and which encourage a privileged position for men. And a lot of people may state that patriarchy does not exist in our current society, but here it is in some more by the numbers. Women are 47% more likely to suffer severe injuries in a car crash because safety features are designed for men. This is literally shown in crash dummies, where they show you how they react in certain cars. They are built in the physiological structure of men, which showcases how it puts the man structure ahead of a woman in that sense, because in the most simple of terms, in biology, men and women are built differently to our core. Along with this, only 6 countries give women equal legal work rights as men. From the World Bank's recent Women, Business, and Law reports that measured gender discrimination in 187 countries. It found that only Belgium, Denmark, France, Latvia, hey granddaddy's home country, Luxembourg, and Sweden were the only countries that scored full marks on all 8 indicators, from receiving a pension to freedom of movement and influencing economic decisions women make during their careers. And a typical economy only gives women 3/4 of the rights that men get in these measured areas. And how I believe this is highlighted within the movie Barbie is actually how Greta Gerwig portrayed Kens in Barbie Land as women almost. So if you watch the Barbie movie, I'm sure that you have also heard the critiques that the Kens, or the men of the movie, are actually not really given a personality. And she turned this on its head by actually taking inspiration from a lot of misogynistic views that happened in a lot of movies, unfortunately, over the past century of film. And this is quite literally showcased within one of the very first quotes about Ken in the movie. Barbie has a great day every day, but Ken only has a great day if Barbie looks at him. And it acquires some of the most simplistic ideas about patriarchy in the real world that really shows how it identifies with women. And also, in quite layman's terms, Psychology Today and Wendy Jones, PhD, termed patriarchy of being criticized for failing to acknowledge the oppression and injustice that exists within male identities. And the Barbie film actually acknowledges this criticism when Aaron, one of the lower ranked administrators at Mattel, says, "I'm a man without power. Does that make me a woman?" This is also just a note that I totally acknowledge you are probably receiving a lot more cuts in this podcast than normal, but that is also because I am in the very beginning stages of figuring out podcasting for myself. Before I get into the next statistical analysis of Barbie, we are going to analyze the great speech that America Ferrera gives towards the latter part of the movie. As stereotypical Barbie is having a breakdown, America Ferrera, in a sense, breaks down herself and really showcases how it feels to see other women crumble in a patriarchal society and feel like you really can't help them. To start, she goes, "It is literally impossible to be a woman. You are so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you are good enough. Like how we have to always be extraordinary, but somehow we're always doing it wrong." She's breaking down this barrier of how we not only view ourselves, but how we view many women around us in areas and places of hurt and disgust within ourselves, whether that's internalized misogyny or internalized insecurities. We really portray that onto others, as well as really showcasing it onto ourselves when we are in a woman-to-woman relationship, whether it be a friendship, romantic, whatever have you. She goes on to say you have to be thin, but not too thin, and you can never say you want to be thin. You have to say you want to be healthy, but also you have to be thin. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money because that's crass. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You have to lead, but you can't squash other people's ideas. Sorry, I'm having difficulty turning a page. You're supposed to love being a mother, but don't talk about your kids all the damn time. You have to be a career woman, but also always be looking out for other people. You have to answer for men's bad behavior, which is insane, but if you point that out, you're accused of complaining. You're supposed to say pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much or that you threaten other women because you're supposed to be a part of this sisterhood. But you always stand out and always be grateful, but never forget that the system is rigged. So find a way to acknowledge that, but always be grateful. You have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, and never get out of line. This body of this speech that America Ferrera gives really showcases the oxymoron of simply living in womanhood. And it really is crazy to me simply because I believe that if you can't relate to this as a woman, you are either denying yourself your own mental thoughts and insecurities, or you just have very fortunately never lived in what is considered modern society. It's also showcasing the constant back and forth of the mentality of the fact that women are put in boxes and told how and when and why we should check off these boxes, and to only basically be seen as objects of the society, but never actually admit to being an object, because that means we're actually admitting to the patriarchy, and we don't want to do that. She goes on to say, it's too hard, it's too contradictory, and nobody gives you a medal or says thank you. And it turns out, in fact, that you're only doing everything wrong. Not only are you doing everything wrong, but also everything is your fault. And this showcases how everything at the end of the day is blaming yourself, whether it be as a woman or a human. And I think all of us can relate to this line, not just women, because there is not a day that goes by where I think people don't blame themselves about a lot of things. And showcasing that just shows how not hard, but overarchingly difficult it can be to be in a society where we place such high standards on ourselves to only crumble and fall underneath. And she finishes out this great speech by saying, I'm just so tired of watching myself and every single other woman tie herself into knots so that people will like us. And if all of that is also true for a doll just representing women, then I don't even know. Finishing out this by tying it all back to the fact that stereotypical Barbie is still a doll in this point, showcases all the hardships of being a woman and how it's mirrored through dolls, whether it's literally sexualizing a children's doll that is a woman, or putting them up against one another, just like Bratz and Barbie. I think, unfortunately, we do live in this life where women are meant to be put up against women, and we really don't pay any attention to it and just let it happen. And I think that is where patriarchy succeeds, and we actually need to pay more attention to it. So finally, the Barbie movie really made me think a lot about the Bechdel test. And if you don't know what the Bechdel test is, it asks whether a work features at least two female characters who have a conversation about something other than a man. And in some iterations, the requirement is that the two female characters also have to have a name. Now, here are some crazy stats to give you on the Bechdel test that I think also just proves yet again, unfortunately, that patriarchy is still very much alive in our society today. A 2022 study found that 49.6% of the 1,200 most popular movies globally over the previous 40 years have passed the Bechdel test. So yes, it's about at 50%, but in my opinion, it should never be anything less than 95. Because in the most layman's of terms, if only 49.6% of these movies give that to a woman, then it's saying that women have nothing to talk about besides a man and being in a relationship with a man, which is very false in this day and age if you actually sit and think about it. But to be fair, there is a Bechdel test website where there are 9,802 movies in that database, and 57.1% pass all 3 tests. So the female characters having a name and having a conversation with one another about something other than a man. Not 1,000%. 1,000, which is 10.2%, pass two of the 3 tests, and 21.7% pass 1 test, and 11.1% pass no test at all. So a lot of this does come from, or I should say, a lot of this is inspired to be in this podcast episode simply because I saw all the controversy about Joe Coy basically calling the Barbie movie a movie about a doll with boobs, and basically giving all this praise to Oppenheimer within that same breath, if you will. And it goes to think how many movies are made by women for women, or made by men for men, or made by men for women, and made by women for men. And I think this Bechdel test really speaks true throughout all ages, because there are a lot of movies out there, if not all movies, have conversations between men that have names that talk about something besides a woman. And so really highlighting this test is what it means to be a feminist in modern media. And I think it also helps showcase a lot of discrepancies that aren't highly talked about as well within our modern age. Next is Lemonade, and I actually have a statement that I will be stating before I even go into Lemonade. If it seems I do not have much on this topic than others, it is because I acknowledge that I do not have the experiences that Black women have in this country and other countries alike. So I'm purely showing light on how transformative this album is, as well as giving it the space it needs. So Lemonade by the numbers. Lemonade was streamed about 150 million times via Tidal, setting a record for the most streamed album in a single week by a female artist. Beyoncé's Lemonade was a 2016 top-selling album in the world, according to the International Federation of Phonographic Industry Market Report. So that simply showcases the success of Lemonade by numbers, but also we want to talk about what Lemonade is about, and it's about a deeply personal testament describing Beyoncé's discovery that her husband Jay-Z was unfaithful. And throughout its 12 songs, it accompanies Beyoncé on her journey from denial to anger to emptiness and empathy, apathy, and forgiveness and redemption. And it's also a manifesto, in a sense, of personal creativity. Lemonade is specifically focused on how the oppression of African Americans affected their families and marital relationships in the visual art film made by the album, or for the album, I should say. Beyoncé takes the painful history and reimagines it for the purpose of empowerment. I will be linking an article also made by LSU that really discusses the impact and great extent of this album. Sorry, I literally almost burped. And I will admit a lot of these are direct quotes, but if I have any personal opinions about them, I will let it be known. But again, I am acknowledging that I am a white woman, and I do not have anywhere near the experiences that a lot of women of color experience in this country. To illustrate this point, we draw upon Black feminist and postmodern theory. Black feminist theory centers the following primary tenets. Black women concurrently experience a triple jeopardy of race, class, and gender, and that their lives cannot be understood by these constructs in a singular form. 2, that Black women experiences are often subsumed in discourses on race or gender alone, and thus are marginalized by notions of Blackness defined by maleness or gender defined by white femininity. And 3, that Black women's lived experiences offered a legitimate site of knowledge as Black women's perspectives and theories that have historically been overlooked on matters of social and political importance. This is a very loaded quote by Hill Collins that I think really truly showcases in Lemonade, because she ties together not only her experiences of being a woman, but also being a Black woman. And again, I feel like I can never and will never be able to speak on this to the extent that a woman of color would be able to. So I am more so showcasing how grateful I am of this film and discography and lyricism that Beyonce offers to at least showcase or give light into the experiences. In particular, it destroys the archetype of the strong Black woman who is independent, resilient, and overextending in work and nurturance while remaining immune to the psychological toll of abuse, neglect, and abandonment. Lemonade argues that healing is a process as it walks us through chapters of intuition, denial, anger, apathy, emptiness, accountability, forgiveness, resurrection, and hope. Which leads into our next area of By the Numbers for Lemonade, which is that while I do not have a direct number of how many classes now use this in women and gender studies, there is, as it fades, it will be inked permanently on college transcripts. The University of Texas at San Antonio professor Dr. Kintra D. Brooks uses the album as her entire framework for her course on Black women, Beyonce, and pop culture. She views Lemonade as a much deeper than anything a pop star has done before. She's having a conversation about how Black women can heal from pain, as the professor tells Time magazine. While it's uncertain of specific numbers, there are a multitude of classes across universities who use the visual album and lyrics as the educational foundation for classes. I know that my university that I graduated from, there were actually 2 different classes where Lemonade was actually a required text, in a sense, where you have required textbooks, and I thought that was actually something so interesting, but also so powerful in a sense, because it's taking art in its truest form and showcasing how it really should be showcased for all of us. Its themes of infidelity and ultimately forgiveness spurred a national discourse on the state of Beyonce's marriage, but that doesn't cover the full scope of Lemonade. She also addresses motherhood, police brutality, racism, and Black liberation. I lost my space. I'm seeing how I need to reorganize my documents in the future. And also, I think Beyonce is able to highlight how infidelity is a central idea in America pop culture, and it undergirds notions of of masculinity and upholds patriarchy. This ideal of how a man is not a man unless he has many sexual conquests and many different women. And this notion of masculinity is a central construct in Western culture, even permeating and the expressions of gender and non-conforming people. And I think this also just, again, is a pillar in modern feminism and what it means to be a woman in modern media, because Beyonce was able to encapsulate all these lyrics and thoughts and feelings and experiences of not only what it means to be a woman, but a woman of color in marriage and being a mother and all these other things that you kind of align a woman with, and just beating it down and saying, like, this is not okay. Next, which I'm sure a lot of you will probably click away at this point, but I urge you to stay because I have quite a lot to say about this, is Taylor Swift in modern media and commentary on her. So let's simply start with how successful she is as a woman first, let alone as an artist. The massive debut of 1989 Taylor's version helped extend her lead over Barbra Streisand for the #1 most albums for a female artist. Swift now has 13 #1 records to Streisand's 11. She has amassed a net worth of over $400 million, sold over 500 50 million. She has sold over 50 million albums worldwide, won 11 Grammy Awards, and spent 49 weeks at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart. Her achievements extend beyond this, though, as she has received 34 American Music Awards, earned $365 million from touring between 2011 to 2021, and broken records for simultaneous songs on Billboard's Global 200 chart. A lot of you may be questioning how this all ties in. I am going to be reading quotes from Taylor Swift, believe it or not, and showcase how many men may have had the same exact experience or reaction to experiences, and she is absolutely pummeled by media. Firstly, with the iconic "a man can react, a woman can only overreact," with the most recent example being how she reacted to Joe Coy's joke about her being showcased in the NFL, and how the NFL shows her a lot. Dana Carvey and David Spade this week joined other comedians in offering a defense of Joe Coy's much maligned hosting performance at the Golden Globes, questioning why Taylor Swift put on a show of being offended when she became the target of Joe Coy's innocuous joke about her romance with NFL star Travis Kelce. This was a literal opening paragraph and title for a news article of the Golden Globes. Meanwhile, literally within the same 20 seconds, Joe Coy brings up the Barbie movie, and they showcase Ryan Gosling, and they show how he basically was failing to crack a smile, and viewers took to X, formerly known as Twitter, to express their amusement and gratification on Gosling's reaction. Literally saying, quote, "Panning to the disappointed faces of Greta Gerwig and Ryan Gosling was gold. And he had no patience with jokes about Barbie, and neither do I at this point." Basically putting Ryan Gosling's reaction way above Taylor Swift's, even though it was quite literally almost the same. I'll put the two reactions right here, but just my personal opinion. Next is a long quote. You're going to have people who are going to say, "Oh, she just writes songs about her ex-boyfriends." And I think, frankly, that's a very sexist angle to take. No one says that about Ed Sheeran. No one says that about Bruno Mars. And they're all writing songs about their exes, their current girlfriends, and their love life. No one raises a red flag there. So, I will try to find the TikTok, but there is a TikTok where a girl actually makes a database of all of Taylor Swift's songs next to all of Morgan Wallen's songs. Keep in mind, Taylor Swift has double the amount of Morgan Wallen's songs. Taylor Swift has 192, Morgan Wallen has 90. Taylor Swift is at 37% of her songs talking about relationships and love, while Morgan Wallen has 27%. Keep in mind, he literally has half the amount of her. So there's only room to grow from there, buddy. And I think that is one of the most common misconceptions about Taylor, is that her songs are only about relationships and love, when a lot of people's favorite songs, especially mine, of course, one of my favorite songs is "The Man," so that shows a lot about me. One of the main things is that a lot of people's favorite songs from her aren't even about relationships or love. They're about friendships or what it's like being a woman, and I think she showcases it within her lyricism. And within this same vein, we can talk about all the good she's done that also goes unrecognized, in my opinion, which is Vote.org, the organization Taylor Swift linked to her post back in 2018, I believe, experienced a surge in voter registration in the 24 hours following her call to action on social media. This site registered 65,000 people, outdoing their total registration for the entire month of August. So she has a large following that accounts towards her recognizing her following and using it for good. And within that sense, you also have to use it to help showcase things that should be happening in our world. So, for example, voter registration. As we all know, another thing that was really big with Taylor Swift was actually the whole Ticketmaster debacle. And after the demand for her tickets of the 2023 Eras Tour overwhelmed Ticketmaster, it prompted members of Congress to actually go into the company's hold on concert sales and just showcased how much of a monopoly there is. And within Ticketmaster, and who knows if that was purposeful or not, I wouldn't put it against her, but I also have no clue because we're not going to get into how much of Ticketmaster is a monopoly. Not in today's time. We have to talk about how successful this tour was, especially in bringing back our modern economy. Based on answers of average concert attendance, the company estimates that Swift's fans spent about $93 million per show. Yes, on tickets, but also on merchandise, travel, hotels, and outfits. Add that all up, and by the end of the U.S. tour, you've got a $5.7 billion boost to the country's economy. And a lot of people have accounted her and Beyonce's Renaissance tour to actually bringing back the economy. And to give it more statistics, the U.S. Travel Association, of how Taylor went to 20 U.S. cities, gave an average $1,300 per Swift fan spending in local economies on travel, hotel stays, food, as well as merchandise and costumes. And to give you a relation to that in male terms, that amount of spending is on par with the Super Bowl, but imagine it happening in 53 different nights at 20 different cities. She did that. But of course, she's only an artist who writes about breakups. Just to give you another sense of, they say I'd hustle, put in the work. They wouldn't shake their heads and question how much of this I deserve. To quote The Man by Taylor Swift. Taylor is the only living artist to have 4 albums on the Billboard Top 10 at the same time since Herb Alpert in 1966. Following his death in 2016, Prince had 5 albums in the top 10. Swift is the only woman with 4 albums in the top 10 at the same time since Billboard 200 was combined from its previously separate mono and stereo album charts into one all-encompassing list in August of 1963. Can you tell I'm reading from a sheet? Which I hope to get better at anyways. And I feel like this wouldn't be an episode of feminism and talking about Taylor Swift if we did not talk about the whole entire Kanye debacle, in which I talk about how she opened up to Time magazine. Make no mistake, my career was taken away from me, she told Time magazine. You have a fully manufactured frame job in an illegally recorded phone call, which Kim Kardashian edited, then put out to say everyone that I was a liar. It took me down psychologically to a place I've never been before, and I moved to a foreign country, didn't leave a rental house for a year, and I was afraid to get on phone calls. I pushed away most people in my life because I didn't trust anyone anymore, and I went down really, really hard. Damn if she didn't showcase how being betrayed felt, but on, I don't want to say pedestal because that makes it sound like she's glorifying it, on a next level in a sense. She really showcased that and announced that, and I think these 4 pillars just showcase what it feels like to be a woman, from being betrayed by relationships and infidelity to being betrayed by the common media to being betrayed by your own collegiate performances, and finally having something that is made for you and everyone in the world that does not align with being a woman, bashing it as well with Barbie. I think that these really showcase what it's like to be a woman, and I think that's why I wanted this to be my first episode, because I think a lot of my morals align with the fact that I am a woman. I say this as I'm literally holding a mini microphone in the color pink. But obviously I would never want to not be a woman. I love being a woman. I think there is something about sisterhood that's unspoken between every single woman, because it goes from literally acting like you know someone in a bar if you see that they're uncomfortable with a situation that's happening. It's just something that I love about, as America Ferrera says, the sisterhood, the womanhood. And it's something I wouldn't trade for the world. But at the same time, I think we need to get better at acknowledging where internalized misogyny happens and letting ourselves have grace, but also calling ourselves out on that. I think that a lot of it has to do with insecurities as well, and putting that onto other women because you don't think a male has those. So again, internalized misogyny in that sense. But this was my first episode. I know that this seemed very statistical and reading off a sheet of paper. I hope that I get better at this, admittedly, especially because a lot of other episodes I actually will have someone else with me, so I'll have someone to have a conversation with me. And if you think this angle is too close to have a second person, I have a thing coming in where it'll have my camera further back so you can actually see the other seat right next to me, but it is covered in stuff right now. If you're watching, I love you. If you're watching and you enjoyed this and you think you'll enjoy more topics, say subscribed, like this, share it with people. My battery is out, so I guess this is where it's going to end. Next week, I will have a friend on, and the topic will actually be growing up with an immigrant parent. So I hope that you all will enjoy the next episode. And yeah. If you're she, he, they, I love you. And I hope you come back next week.